The greatest betrayal isn't found in a kiss. It's found in a zero. For 30 years, my life was a perfect, unshakable structure. Frederick and I had built a rock cathedral against chaos. But disaster is not an explosion. It is an infiltration. One rainy Wednesday, a perfect zero on a bank statement. Over $500,000 gone. Stolen by my own daughter, the one for whom I had sacrificed everything. That theft was the involuntary key that allowed me to unlock my husband's double life. You are about to witness the deconstruction of a world orchestrated by the woman who lost everything. If you want the raw, cold truth, subscribe now. That is the price to pay to know what happens next. I have always loved order, not the manic order that borders on pathology, but the quiet, reassuring order of well-established things. My marriage, which had lasted for 30 years, was of that order, a cathedral of compromise and solidly anchored habits. That is why, faced with betrayal, my reaction was one of clinical coldness, a surgical analysis of the wound, not hysteria. If conjugal life is a construction, then Frederick and Felicity had just knocked down its load-bearing walls. My role was no longer to live in this home, but to become the architect of deconstruction. On that day, the absence of $530,000 from my account was merely a technical detail. The real bankruptcy lay in Frederick's lie. My daughter's theft had armed me with a lethal piece of information. He didn't just have a mistress. He had a second life that he was funding with our money. I did not cry. I did not scream. I put on my jacket, the one I always wear for important meetings, and I left. I was going to stop being the wife and the mother. I was going to become the analyst of his collapse, and the plan was brutally simple: dismantle his reality piece by piece. My first move was not to call a lawyer, but to open a new, empty bank account. The second was to go to the studio of my former neighbor, Richard. Richard, a 40-year-old computer engineer who lived in the well-ordered solitude of his algorithms, was the only person I could trust completely for such a morally questionable task. He had always had a quiet fascination with me, a respectful and non-intrusive one. I entered his minimalist studio, where the only light came from 3 computer screens. I didn't beat around the bush. "Richard, I need you." "Eleanor, what brings you here at this hour?" His voice was soft, surprised. "I need details on Frederick's private life, his real-time location, access to his communications, his bank flows in depth." I handed him a USB key containing the evidence of Felicity's theft and a copy of the joint account statements. I offered no emotional context, just data. I spoke like a project manager delivering a briefing to a contractor. "I don't want passionate revenge, Richard. I want an audit. I need to know the exact size of the hole before I know if it can be filled, or if it must be dynamited." He looked at the screen. The amount, my daughter's falsified digital signature, Frederick's silence on the matter. He didn't ask about my feelings. He saw the brute logic behind my request. "It's illegal, Eleanor. Very illegal. I've lost my daughter and my marriage. I don't have much left to lose legally. Frederick owes me the truth and justice." He sighed, a resigned acceptance of my relentless logic. Richard was not a romantic. He was a man of systems. My system needed repair, and he was the tool. "I need 24 hours. I'm going to build him a data cage." That was all I needed to hear. The architect had found her foreman. I left him an empty envelope like a silent down payment. 24 hours later, I still hadn't said anything to Frederick. The wait was not a torment. It was a calibration. I behaved as usual, the discreet wife, the impeccable homemaker. Richard handed me an armored laptop, a simple password: order. The data cage he had built was not just a surveillance tool. It was a window into Frederick's parallel reality. It revealed the geometry of his betrayal, precise, repetitive, and thus vulnerable. Frederick led a double life in Puteaux, in an apartment paid for lavishly, with my money. Felicity's money had served as a down payment for this investment in lies. The mistress, Caroline, was not a fling. She was another woman, with whom he shared discreet dinners on Tuesday and Thursday evenings, under the pretext of late meetings at his architecture firm. I observed the data flows for a week. I noted the patterns. 1. Tuesday and Thursday. Frederick turned off his professional phone at 7:00 p.m., put his private phone on airplane mode, and only used encrypted messaging apps to contact Caroline. 2. Money. Expenses were meticulous. Michelin-starred restaurants, regular weekend trips to the south, and a monthly salary transfer of $5,000 to Caroline, officially for a consulting contract. This transfer, executed on the 5th of every month, was the backbone of their arrangement. 3. The mortgage. The apartment in Puteaux was not just a pied-à-terre, it was in Frederick's name alone, but the mortgage payments came from the joint account he had siphoned. The irony was a cold blade. Every piece of data was added to my plan like a construction brick. I felt neither rage nor jealousy, only an Olympian calm, the kind that precedes major surgery. Emotion is a bug in the system. I was in debug mode. I spent 2 sleepless nights drafting documents, listing transactions, and identifying vulnerabilities. Richard helped me remotely, via encrypted messages. He was fascinated by the purity of my intention. "You don't want to confront him?" he asked me one night. "Confrontation is an emotional luxury I cannot afford, Richard. Confrontation is a dialogue. I have nothing left to say to Frederick. I want a monopoly on action." I understood that Frederick had built his second life on a foundation of delay. He took the funds, made the money disappear, and then counted on the months passing for me not to notice anything. He had forgotten that order is my oxygen. My deconstruction plan had to be faster, more efficient, and above all, irreversible, before he even realized that war had been declared. He had to fall into the void, not by being pushed, but by realizing that the ground beneath his feet had never been there. I set the execution date, the 5th of the month, the day of the monthly transfer to Caroline. First phase, financial isolation. 4 days before the 5th, I went to see a notary. I used the file on Felicity, the theft, and the file on Caroline, the transfers, to establish proof of misappropriation of marital assets and gross negligence in managing the estate. With the signing of a document that Frederick had neglected to update when we bought our house 30 years ago, a residual non-solidarity clause, I was able to unilaterally freeze the majority of our joint investment accounts and transfer the ownership of our main residence to a trust managed by me alone, pending divorce. Second phase, digital disappearance, the 5th at 9:00 a.m. On the morning of the 5th, Frederick left the house as usual, giving me a quick kiss on the cheek. At precisely 9:00 a.m., the time his automatic transfer of $5,000 to Caroline was supposed to execute, Richard activated his script. The script did not block the transfer. It did something far worse. 1. It triggered an automatic alert to Frederick's bank's legal department, flagging the transfer to a suspicious account, Caroline's, using the evidence on Felicity as proof of extended family fraud. 2. It transferred the entirety of the joint account to my new account, leaving it at the perfect balance of $0, a zero that would echo mine. 3. It sent a series of pre-written emails, one to Frederick's architecture firm, one to his main clients, and one to Caroline. The email to his firm, sent from an anonymous account, was a simple sentence. Verify the use of Mr. Frederick's time for Tuesday and Thursday evenings. The numbers do not match. The email to Caroline contained only the screenshot of the failed 9 a.m. transfer and the sentence, "Your consultant no longer has a salary. Eleanor." Third phase, the breaking point, the 5th, at 6 p.m. I returned home at 6 p.m. The living room was silent, the twilight filtering through. Frederick arrived an hour later. He wasn't angry, he was hollowed out. He didn't scream, he simply whispered, his voice broken, holding his dead phone in his hand. "The mortgage didn't go through. The account is empty. The bank called. What have you done?" I did not take off my jacket. I stood at a distance, observing the collapse of the edifice he had thought so solidly built. "I did an audit, Frederick. You built your life on a lie. Alone. One day you have to pay it back." You even warned Caroline? She said it was over." "Caroline was just an investment, Frederick. It was a loan. I called back. The architect had to dismantle the foundations." He raised his hand, a gesture of despair. I took a step back. "Where is Felicity? She stole everything." "Felicity stole money. You stole my time. Yours is irreplaceable. As for Felicity, she has already paid her debt." I pulled 2 documents from my pocket, a letter from his bank informing him of an investigation into malfeasance, and a plane ticket for a distant country, in Felicity's name, with the departure time in 1 hour. "I paid for her ticket with the rest of your retirement fund, Frederick. That was the deal. She is gone and won't be coming back. You can look for her, or you can try to save what's left of your reputation. But do not look for me." I picked up my small suitcase that I had packed days in advance and walked out the door. I left him in the middle of our once perfect living room, alone, facing his absolute zero. Outside, Richard was waiting for me, not as a lover, but as a driver. He opened the car door. "And now, Eleanor?" I looked back. The cathedral was empty. "Now, Richard, I'm building something new, a luxury that doesn't need anyone else's order." It was the resolution. Vengeance is not an emotion. It is an equation. Tell me in the comments if you would have made me the architect of your own justice. And if you enjoyed this cold calculation, like and subscribe. The next story is just waiting to be written.